Unfortunately, we don't have any specific therapy for these patients at this stage. What we're doing is to develop treatment or prevention methods for the future. As you know, developing a drug, developing a vaccine takes a long time. So we are rushing, we are moving as quickly as we can, but such therapies will certainly not be ready in the coming year. So for now, we here and everyone throughout the world would have to fight this epidemic using infection control measures, using common sense, and teaching individuals to avoid catching the infection. So we have to use our knowledge, and there are no specific drugs that will be available in the short term. Well, the drug you're talking about is Gilead's remdesivir, which is being tried. It was developed for Ebola infection and tested against Ebola and found to be somewhat useful, but not as good as some of the antibodies that were applied to treat Ebola. So it's fallen out of favor for treatment of Ebola. But there's reason to believe that it works against SARS, for example, the SARS virus, or the MERS virus. There's some animal experiments that show it has positive effect. And so trying it now in this outbreak is the right thing to do. And I know Gilead has set up 2 studies, one in very severely ill patients in China, and a second one in moderately ill patients. Together, they're about they hope to enroll about 700 or 800 subjects in a control manner. So some people will get the drug and some people will get placebo. And that way they could tell whether it really works or not. So it's ongoing. It probably will take many months to do if they get to enroll all the patients. So we would have to wait and see. I think all of us who are working on this feel that this is very doable. The problem is that we're in the midst of an epidemic. There's a great deal of urgency. But if you give us five years, I think every group will feel very comfortable that they could identify an antibody or a vaccine or a drug. But I think now the timeline is all contracted to see if you could find a hit in a few months, turn it into a lead drug in a few months after that, and produce it and test it for safety. And could you do all that in 1 year or 18 months? That's the pressure. So a normally 5 to 10 year timeline is now being compressed.
It's possible?
Well, we will have to see. I think many people are working as fast as they can, including us here. But there are some companies who are working on vaccine. They think they could produce it in a few months and begin testing. But as Dr. Fauci mentioned as part of the president's press conference, even if you get it out there in a few months, the testing still takes another year or 18 months. So it's not going to have an immediate impact. But it's something we need should this problem persist and fester and continue to plague the world. We're going to need those interventions to apply in a major way. So we have to push the work as fast as we can, assuming this epidemic is not going to go away. I think the first thing is to educate the public without causing panic. The public at large needs to know that this is an infectious disease that's transmitted via someone coughing or sneezing and getting surfaces contaminated, and another person could come into contact with the virus, typically using the hand. Okay, so hand sanitary condition is the most important thing. the mask is useful for persons who are already infected and you want to contain the virus from spraying out. It's also useful for healthcare personnel who need to be in close contact with the infected patient. But for the general public, it doesn't make sense to wear a mask on a subway or walking on the street, which is done in Asia. That's not advisable in my view and in the view of the public health officials here. And so I see a lot of practices that are not quite sensible. So the most sensible thing is keeping your hands very clean and keeping the environment clean. And that's a task that everyone has to take on. The other thing is, while this is a very important epidemic, we have to keep in mind that 98% of the people recover, right? That's not to say that 2% mortality is not important. It's important. But we also need to keep in mind that we live with seasonal flu. Seasonal flu causes tens of millions of infections each year. And we almost don't pay any attention to it, even though vaccines are available and drugs are available. And even in the US, we have tens of thousands of deaths from seasonal flu. Again, mostly in elderly people or immunocompromised individuals or persons with chronic diseases. But that's similar to the new coronavirus also. So we have to put it in proper context. This is the mortality rate for this viral infection is about 3 or 4 times lower than SARS and about almost 10 times lower than MERS, another coronavirus infection. So we just have to keep it in context. And if we are not panicking about seasonal flu, even though there's so many deaths each year, we're panicking because this is new and mysterious.